With a rapidly evolving technological landscape, we have so many developments around the business and technology management. We are honored to have with us as panel members the industry thought leaders, Ms. Lakshya Shivaramakrishnan, Preeti Guruswamy, and Chitra, who will be throwing light on multiple things which have been happening in the industry side. This panel discussion is a part of industry and academia interaction towards the Swayam Course, Technology for Business Management. With this note, we welcome all the panelists to share their thoughts.
Thank you, Jeeva.
Thank you, Jeeva.
Thank you, Dr. Jeeva.
Yeah. So I think we can take this panel in a very conversational style. So this course is covering a lot of things, right, from the basics of technology management, and it goes on, covering the project management and systems development lifecycle, enterprise business management. We also touched upon certain topics on cybersecurity. So you being the industry leaders since so many years, I request you to introduce yourself and also go ahead with the panel discussion.
Thank you, Jeeva.
Sure. I'm Lakshya Shivaram-Krishnan. I work as a technical program manager. I'm also a TEDx speaker and a DEI advocate. I'm very passionate about nurturing communities and ensuring women thrive in the tech industry.
I'm Preeti Guruswamy. I'm a leadership coach and leadership facilitator, focused very much on excelling tech leaders in this new age leadership. I'm also top voice at LinkedIn, and I sit as advisory board for regional leaders of Lean-In, managing different communities across the world. I'm also a DEI expert, and I motivate a lot of women leaders to grow and thrive.
I'm Chitra Gurjar. I've had nearly 3 decades of experience in the technology space. 2 decades of them spent with product companies in product engineering and building some really, really fascinating, interesting products. After that, I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a coach and a consultant on digital transformation and product management for different kinds of businesses. I'm a volunteer with several organizations in the space of children and young adult learning. I'm also a podcaster. I recently co-authored a book on branding. I am also a sports enthusiast and delighted to be here with these esteemed panel members today. So we're here to talk about technology for business management, and each one of us has had some different kind of experiences through our work, through our interactions. What would we like to leave our viewers or listeners with? Why don't we start with you, Lakshya?
Sure. I think the genesis of any product building starts with the software development lifecycle. And I can maybe take a stab at drawing a parallel between SDLC and program or project management. Basically, program is a collection of projects. Typically, they translate to the same thing. So let's look at software development lifecycle as the what of a technical journey, whereas the project management gives a framework. It's the how. It gives us a framework to operate and ensure we realize each of our goals that we want to achieve as a product. So the phases of SDLC typically starts with gathering your requirements, why and what are you doing, what is the problem statement you really want to solve. Then we move to design, where we are designing how are we supposed to architect that system, how should our database look like, how should the user interfaces look like, can it scale, what does it mean to scale to X million, billion users. Then we look into development. This is like your core testing, where you're seeing, okay, how do you write that code and how do you push it to production. And then there are nuances like testing, maintenance. How do you ensure that the right unit tests, integration tests are written when your modules are interacting with multiple systems. While this is about SDLC or software development lifecycle, it has to integrate seamlessly with project management. Project management involves the same phases, right? But what gets done there is slightly different. When you're talking about initiation or defining the different stages, you sort of think about what is the project scope, what are your risks, who are your stakeholders, what are you trying to achieve. Then you go about defining your timelines. You say who are your critical stakeholders, how should the project timelines look like, how do you break it. When it goes to the development phase, you talk about how do you keep your stakeholders accountable for, you have a launch date. How do you come back? How do you track your progress, continuous progress? Then you go into the testing phase, where it's more about managing your release cycle, managing your sign-offs from various leads, and finally, post-launch, it's about ensuring the metrics are in place, ensuring you have a prioritization of, okay, if a bug comes in, where should it be picked, in which sprint. So this is how, it's not that SDLC happens first and then project management takes over. These are very intrinsically linked, and they need to like go hand in hand to ensure like the teams are successful, the product shipment is successful. So these are like some this thing in my experience.
Lot of things, lot of moving parts, right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes you wonder how the whole thing comes together. So, I mean, I've been in situations where sometimes as a engineer very early on in my career, I wasn't quite sure about why I'm writing this piece of code, who's going to consume it, what is going to happen to it after I, finish developing it. And there is so many things at work to make all of this go smoothly and flawlessly. So Preeti, what do you think goes into the making of this whole a successful project?
Yeah, I think in my 25 years of this corporate career as an engineering leader managing global teams, because I was to manage global teams, one of the, I followed two things very, very clearly. One was the communication, right? It becomes very, very important. The communication is very clear. And when the communication gets clear, the alignment happens, right? Especially, and this will lead to less misunderstanding. And as I said, I was leading a lot of initiatives, innovations globally. One of the other method that I followed is sundown method, and I call it a sundown method because once when India is closing down, the US is coming up, right? So ensuring that these time zones are actually met together and there is a flow of information, and ensuring there's always virtual check-in. I know we are speaking about a virtual hybrid model when the pandemic hit, but actually the virtual check-in really existed even before the pandemic, because while each of the organization globally and culturally interacting with each other, this became the fundamental about it. Now, while this is all about communication and alignment that happens, the most important thing that fundamentally lies here is the trust, the relationship. It becomes very important whether you're a developer, whether you're a product manager, engineering manager, or a CXO. Building the relationship under different functions, understanding each other, plays a very, very critical role. And this is a continuous process. It is not like, when my project's deadline is missed, at that point of time I'm going to build relationship. It's not going to work. Let's be very, very clear. It has to happen from the day one. And I have told this a lot at various campuses or in various interviews of mine. The relationship, even as you enter your corporate space, you should start building from there, right? It is not the responsibility of the leaders. It becomes the responsibility of every individual to understand with whom I'm working, why I'm working, right? Like Chitra, you mentioned that when I was writing the code, I didn't know why I'm writing the code, right? Because today, I think every leader in every organization, they're very, very clear and articulate their vision and also the goals and the values, cultural values. Pay attention to it, right? Because as you enter the corporate world, all these feels like very heavy. but they are the crux of everything, including in your project management or in your product management. All of these plays a very critical value, even in your performance for that matter. All the cultural part of it, you are evaluated on all of this, and this all starts with a basic element of trust and the relationship building. For anything to happen very smoothly on a particular date, right? And we all should accept everything doesn't happen every time very smoothly, right? Life is not that way, and same as the projects or products is not the way as we plan. But the relationship that you build, bringing all the people together, and I call this as collective intelligence, and the harnessing this collective intelligence together and make it happen is where you reach very peacefully. I wouldn't say peacefully, I think very coordinately, agreeing with all the together, we'll be able to achieve things together. So I think that harnessing that collective intelligence is the key for any initiative or projects or innovation to be successful.
Very beautifully said. I love the use of the phrase collective intelligence. And this is one point I would like to add to what Lakshya and Preeti have said. To build anything successfully, trust very important, and it's also how everything comes together, right? And every individual has a role to play, and everything has to sort of mesh together very well for this success. And why I'm bringing this point up is when you transition from being a student to getting into corporate life, maybe because of the structures of our educational system, the focus is on individual performance. Whereas when you get into an organization or work with a group of people, it's about understanding each other, developing that trust, and usually there is one common goal that binds everybody. So like what Preeti said, make it your business to understand that goal. So when I gave my own example, for me the learning was ask questions and continuously ask them till you are able to relate to why are we doing this, and what are we doing, and who are we doing it for. So one key aspect here is everything begins with a need. You build a product because there is a need. You're trying to solve somebody's problem. So along with trust, you need to have empathy for the customer or the person experiencing the pain. So for example, while building healthcare products, you're always keeping two main entities in mind, because they're two major actors, as we call them. There's the patient and there's the doctor. Right. One receives the service, the other provides the service. So how would you build a product? Like many people say, oh, I will develop an app. I will build an app. Who are you building for? Have you walked a day in the life of a patient who is suffering from multiple illnesses and understood, will they really use your app? What they want at that point in time is a doctor who is listening to them and who can give them some pain relief, right? Whereas a doctor would benefit from an app or a product that will help them understand this patient better. So for example, many people get excited about a lot of the new technologies that are there today in terms of speech recognition or translating speech to text, and they said, oh, this will really help me here, really help me there. But I think at the end of the day, it's that, are you truly able to understand what your customer really needs, right? And from there you take it and translate it into requirements, and then it goes through the whole software development life cycle to create something. But I always say, keep your customer front and center of everything you do, which means what you're doing is beyond you. It's not about you. It's about that problem. It's about, can we collectively solve that problem, right? So what have been some of your challenges, Lakshya, that you have seen?
Yeah, so it's always a race between, the scope, the time, and the resources or the money that is put in, right? And for folks who don't know, it's called the iron triangle, right? There needs to be a balance between scope, time, and budget. And when you talk about scope, right? It can go on. A product can evolve weeks after weeks. If I give you 10 minutes, you will come up with say a phase of the project. But even with 2 years, it's not that you're going to get everything right? So that's where iteration and coming up with very crystal clear requirements, defining those requirements is so critical in ensuring we don't deviate from the scope, right? And then it comes about how do you break down all the things that your product manager envisions. How do you break it down into smaller tasks and track them so that there is no scope creep at any point in time? And finally, it's about how do you keep everything accountable? How do you ensure that if there is a change needed tomorrow, like we were talking, saying what is in today is bound to change tomorrow, right? So how do you keep the right change management techniques in place or the process in place so that you can accommodate any changing requirements? So that's on scope. Moving on to time, I think it's a function of how clearly you put your work estimates, right? You have the breakdown of tasks, but how do you put an estimate saying, okay, collectively this will help me ship the feature or the product by say Y timeline, right? So when you talk about time, that's very critical. Then there's something called critical path management, which is what is the shortest time you need to ship a project. There can be a lot of fancy things you can do, but these need not block that launch, right? How do you identify this shortest path and keep everybody accountable to these critical paths? And then finally, if we talk about resources and budget, it is about how much money do you have? How much? When I say money, it can be your resources, can be your people, it can be your tools, it can be your licenses, your products. How much do you have to get this minimal scope done? That's one. The other is how do you put the right people to the right task to ensure that you ship a great quality product? So it's always a constant, I wouldn't say conflict, but a constant balance we need to seek as program managers, as leaders, tech leaders, to ensure this balance remains. I don't know if you have anything to add, Preeti.
Yeah, I think it was just while you were speaking, I was just resonating the experiences that I had. I think beginning of the career, we were in fact, we didn't have SDLC or anything. We used to write the code, ship the code, have some timelines, and then we got into the fact of SDLC, have your design, and there were products that I worked for a year and a half to release, and there is a huge transition. Like you said, what worked yesterday doesn't mean it will work today, right? And today we are then the phase of agile came in, and then the phase of right now on the weekly. The last stint I did was at least 3 releases in a week, right? I mean, it's and this is cross geographical. It's not like I do it here, and we are always in a cross cultural environment that we work. So what works very well is the best practices.
Right.
Always seamlessly, we have various tools where we can capture these best practices, be it Jira, Confluent. There's so many of these tools available, but capturing the best practices. Now, is it that you capture it once and leave it? No, it is a continuous improvement that you need to keep doing it, right? What worked for the last week releases may not work for this week's releases at all, right? You would discover something new. Then, as you said, technology is in a consistent change. Honestly, I have been working on big data and AI for more than a decade. Part of it, AI, everybody feels AI is new. Technically not.
Yeah.
It has been there. Right? And the way the generative AI is coming and taking its role, so and I'm sure this change and the consistent change happens. One of the most important thing that one needs to invest and the organization needs to invest is the continuous learning and continuous improvement. I think this plays
Absolutely.
a very critical role, right? Processes and change, programs are in change, the product changes, right? I think this is the consistent change.
No, I think you just said it right, because adaptability is key.
Correct.
Right? Even as natural beings, our bodies, our systems, everything is adapting. So adaptability, I think, is so important for any organization. Just because something worked for 10 years, and especially now when week on week new methods, new technologies are coming up, I think adaptability is the only key to staying aware, staying alert about what's happening and how best can we address it. Like, I don't think anybody is going to be able to solve all problems.
Yes.
So that calls for a lot of focus on prioritizing, right? Always have your number one, number two things that I will do for this week, right? And make sure that everybody is aligned with that. So I talk about two things, rhythms and rituals, right? Which are so important to keep, especially when you're talking about organizations of 300, 500 people. How do they work together? If it's one or two, that's fine, right? You will talk to each other, you'll get it done. And with hybrid ways of working, some people are remote, some people are here. We do want to harvest collective intelligence. So ideally it should be able to come from anywhere, right? So to keep teams working smoothly, I always use the analogy of sports teams, right? Being a sports person myself, I always wonder, how do they play so flawlessly on the day of a tournament? And having been there, you always do the small things every day, right? You show up for practice every day. You do your warm-up every day. You have discipline when you step into the arena of play, in the sense you respect all your other team players. You understand everybody has a role to play. So recently reading this book by one of the most successful NBA coaches ever, and the thing he says is, you bench your ego. That is, you leave it there outside. It's not about you. It's about how we can collectively achieve what we want to do. So everybody commits to these rhythms. So in product or software organizations, when everybody comes in on a Monday morning, they all get together and say, what will we accomplish this week? The product manager steps in there and says, hey, these are the two most important features that customers want this week. How can we get it done? The team sits, they brainstorm, they decide how long it's going to take, and they commit to each other that every day, at the end of the day, we will each tell the other person how much we did, where we got stuck, and we'll help each other become unstuck so that the project moves forward. So having these rhythms, and one of the key rhythms I've noticed is transparency in the project. That is, everybody at any point in time knows, and this is where tools become important, right? Like Confluence or Jira. If I take a look at a board, typically in industry parlance, a Kanban board, which indicates the flow of work, is a good tool to see what work is to be done, what work is in progress, and what work has got done. And everybody sees it. It's not that only a project manager has to see it, but everybody in the team is accountable to say that, okay, I finished this, let me go update that board. Right? It also indicates to other people that, hey, this person is free. We can ask them to help us finish something else. So the rhythms, when they go like this, it's like, a colleague of mine used to use the analogy of the Kerala boat races, right? Unless all the 100 people on the boat are rowing in a rhythm, the boat never moves forward, right? And the rituals of doing these discussions on a daily basis. First thing in the morning, where are we today? End of the day, how are we leaving the day? Right? And the end of the week, to Preeti's point, if we had to say that we want to be continuously improving, what did we do well this week? What's the one thing we can change in the following week? right? So if I think any organization or any set of people show these ways of adapting while keeping these rhythms and rituals going, that really creates, I think, some beautiful products and, you know.
So I follow a lot on EQ framework, right? And the EQ framework talks about self-awareness and self-regulation, which is what you spoke about, the self-discipline and the routine, keeping your ego at the bench, right? And a lot of us assume that EQ is something that only leaders will have it or leaders should have it. It does not. EQ is basically developed with a fundamental fact of emotions that humans go through, and it is, if you put that into practice, it puts a lot of processes and even all the products will go into that part of it. For example, like as you said, right, self-regulation and self-awareness comes into your daily practices. Daily practices are the simple things like, you know, we have so many tools like Jira, be it Confluence, everything. These can be productive if we as individuals take responsibility of updating them regularly. The sundown method that I asked, when there is a seamless process that needs to happen between two geographical places that needs to happen, without updating these tools, it can happen without human intervention. While you update these tools as best practices, so the other side of the world can get up and take what is left out. Today we are in this hybrid world where 24 hours we are working, and that is where it becomes very much important about the awareness that I need to do and the regulation that I need to do, right? And what happens if these doesn't happen? Of course there are conflicts that are built. Okay, I did not receive, I did not get it, you did not give it. You know, all these leads into the major crux of conflict management. Right. So that is where you need to have your self-regulation into picture. Let's say when you're, like you were talking about the game when they are there, how does that happen, right? There's so many emotion. One of your colleague missed the goal, right? You at the game you can't go and shout at that person, right? You are able to manage your emotions. The same thing happens at the workplace. You need to understand it, and this is where the fact about social awareness and relationship comes in. Social relationship becomes very, very important aspect of which I think, and the way I look at EQ, while you know these 4 quadrants are there, the inner work is your self-awareness and self-regulation, the outer world is your social awareness and relationship building, which is the crux of anything to get done, right? Being aware, if you are aware that your work is not going to get done, it impacts somebody else, actually talking about it. What are the changes is happening? Having awareness, what changes is happening at the leadership, right? Even leadership, making those changes available for everybody. And today the leadership is very transparent, unlike the other eras that at least we come from, right? So it becomes very, very important, all of these. The fact that social awareness also goes into environmental changes, right? We have AI, Gen AI, then we have so many things emerging today, the chat GPT, right? New engineering that is coming out of it. Being aware and making sure you upskill to these technologies is also part of your social awareness that you bring in, right? I cannot say I'm comfortable, my systems are working, I have built in best processes and I'm going to go there. No, that doesn't work, right? It would only work if you're aware what's happening, just not in your organization, outside your organization. A lot of time, that is where you realize where the change is required, right? Especially when you're building products, right? What is that you can bring to your market?
True.
Matters, right? And that's why I say the EQ framework is just not for behavioral. It also looks at the fact that how you can embed this even in your product life cycle, right? Or even in your process life cycle. We don't talk about it specifically, but these are something that we act every day, right? And that is where I especially for students, before we delve into different technologies that are emerging in the market, one thing that I always say, whether you're entry level or you're executive, have your fundamentals on data structure and algorithms very, very right. All these AI, all of them will change, right? When for me, Java was a big thing, by the way, and now that is nothing, right? So all these are going to change. So let the change happen, but get your fundamentals right, right? And I would segue to you, Chitra, because you work a lot on the product part of it. While there are so many technologies evolving, and there are some traditional products that are not very adaptive because of the security and all of that plays in a role. Where do you see technology and products evolving together?
So, I mean, very good question, Preeti. And see, there are two aspects here, right? One is I'd like to, give the picture of India. Right? Today, we've built this entire technology ecosystem predominantly around delivering services. Point in time, very bounded projects, if you were to call them. But how is it that we can really leapfrog? So, for example, India really had the advantage with adopting something like a UPI stack because we had nothing prior to that, whereas other countries had technologically backed financial systems. We didn't. Yet, how quickly the whole nation adopted to making digital payments. But that also comes at a cost. We'll talk about it a little later. But what I'd really encourage people to think about is, and this cuts across a lot of sub-ecosystems, starts with the family, starts with our own. How do we inculcate this mindset or give our children the freedom to dream, right? How can institutions support it? How can investors nurture it and give it life? All this is important if we have to build great products. What will it take for us? Like the big question on the table is, what is it going to take for India to have its own LLM? Today, in a country which has 500 languages, live languages, do we have an LLM that can actually cater to all our country's needs? Yes, there are pockets of innovation and research happening. There are some well-funded AI organizations like Krutrim.ai or Sarvam.ai, but they are just point in time still. China went ahead and created a DeepSeek at a real low cost. Just today morning, I can't recall the name of the company, but incubated in IIT Madras. It has enabled people to use CPUs instead of GPUs, which will dramatically bring down the cost of using such an environment to create newer machine learning models. We don't need to invest in resources which are really costing a lot of money to build something like this. These are things that make your heart absolutely burst with joy, right? If that can happen in this country, I think people should focus on doing that, which means give yourself the permission to take a lot of risk. Know that, sometime like there's a famous saying, right? You focus on the process of creating something, because once you've developed it, it's done, it's finished, right? But whereas the whole process of building something which actually can be useful to like 1 billion people here, I think, wouldn't that be a great thing to aspire towards, right? So if people could aspire to that, it would be fantastic. Lakshya, what do you think? Can something like that actually manifest?
Yes, of course. Like I'm a big believer of moonshot thinking, and some of these are real problems centered around India, right? But like you said, there are pockets where we're investing in Indian languages. Systems today can understand English, right, which wasn't a thing before. just adding on, and you said it so beautifully, but how do we constantly learn, right? Today, a ChatGPT or a Gemini can really write code for you, but where you can add value is the logic you bring in, the structure and the thinking that you bring in.
And also what Preeti said, right? Keeping your eye on the fundamentals.
Right,
While Gemini and Grok can produce code, you also need to know whether the code suits your context.
Absolutely.
Right? And today there's no playbook for context.
Yeah.
Because there are millions and millions of contexts. Maybe very quickly some AI engine can figure out context.
Right.
There are already, people who are working on things like that.
Yeah.
But until then, I think that context is going to come from first principles, knowing your fundamentals well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Preeti, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I would, while you said there is ChatGPT or Grok which creates the code for you, one of the things that any business leaders or the organization or even any individual should be aware about the threats that underlines that, right? Because especially when you're coding for the organization, the organization or any individual, there are a lot of IPs that is taken into picture. They've considered as well. So being aware about it, and I think the awareness is the key here, and it is very, very important. You need to ask these questions every time. If I'm putting something into ChatGPT, or Gemini, am I doing the right thing? First question, simple question to ask, am I doing the right thing? Is this allowed for me to do? Because look at it as there is a lot of information even in your small piece of the code which could be misutilized. So being aware about it becomes more important. And as you very rightly said, it's not about generating code with a tool, but it is about putting the right logic, and that logic can only come from you, right? And that logic can come from you only if your fundamentals are very, very, very strong. Even today, while we interview executives also, we make sure that the fundamentals we reach go up to the fundamental level, right? So it is not at just the corporate, at the campus level, it is at the executive levels as well. So the fact that being aware about the threats, and what becomes important for the leadership or anybody in the organization is to create these awareness on these cyber threats that is there coming in, making sure that, and also rewarding employees who are following that, right? Because it kind of helps them to build that system in, especially when there are and conducting workshops. And most importantly, as leaders and as individuals, it becomes very important you play that role model part of it, upskill yourself with what are the threats that we are having around you. Make sure every individual in the organization is aware about it, and have the processes and best practices built along with your cultural values. That is where the success happens. Right. The success doesn't happen just by delivering a product. The success happens, and that's why I stress a lot on collective intelligence, when we bring in these different values, when we bring in different awareness of different threats that we are having, and when we all come together, right, and collectively harness each of our strengths and also the weaknesses. We cannot let go of our weaknesses, and that's where the collective intelligence comes in. And all these are built in cultural value for an organization to be successful, and obviously the individuals to be successful. I think that is what I think plays a very critical role, and I would say that plays an important role as such.
So Preeti, I think you really brought in what are the absolute essentials or good foundations to have for any organization or even individuals in terms of what is a huge thing all around us. It's been there for a while, which is cyber threats. Okay, we are living in a more and more digitized world, and where it becomes so important for, like you said, every engineer, developer to understand is, where am I putting this code? Who is consuming it? Am I compromising something for this organization by not paying attention to building very resilient code?
right? That's at an individual engineer level. Similarly, within organizations, today some of the things that we read about are phishing, smishing, and wishing, which is where, and spear phishing, where top executives' email addresses, fake websites, and I have received emails from heads of banks saying that this is an initiative, and I know that my head of bank would not reach out to me, right? So this is happening all the time. People are sending fake SMSs with links. If you don't look closely enough, you're more likely to click on a link, exposing yourself to all kinds of fraud. While this is happening at individual levels, organization levels, it's also happening on international borders today with the amount of conflict that's going on. And if you look at the world today, we are more than ever dependent on global supply chains. If you look at the way an iPhone is manufactured, right, components come from all over the world. Anywhere in that path, anything can happen. So we need everybody, whether it's at an international level, a national level, a local level, companies, individuals, to be aware of these kind of things. I know cybersecurity is a very extensive topic. By the way, would also like to add that it's a great career opportunity for people to consider. There are a lot of options there. And as I was mentioning, even if you're someone like a journalist or a lawyer, in which case you've been trained to be curious, to be aware, to be to how to collect information, right? How to look at the pluses and minuses of a particular situation. I think that's also a great foundation for somebody who wants to consider becoming a cybersecurity consultant. So there's multiple career options also in this space. Anything that you would like to add, Lakshya, before we conclude this session?
No, I think you covered it all. I think being curious, moving with the changing times, being adaptable, I think that's the key to like surviving in the tech industry.
Hey, thank you all. It was really great set of insights. Everything from what Lakshya was talking about, the iron triangle, to your EQ concepts. I think when Chitra was also talking about the project management, the product management part, how it's moving, right? It's been great set of insights for our learners, especially because the set of students or learners who are there on the Swayam portal, you have thrown light on every part, like right from the project management to SDLC or the leadership role, or it could be about where India is heading in coming days. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope we continue to come back and have few more sessions so that they get more inputs. Thank you.
Thank you.